In guitar mode, strum really shines when we start using the strumming keys. So there are 12 strumming keys, and they begin an octave above middle C, and you see it laid out here. And again, you'll see a representation on my keyboard here, which is a bit more clear to follow along with. But it also occurs 3 octaves below the middle C. So you can trigger these strumming patterns with your left hand if you're more comfortable that way as a keyboard player, or you can voice the chords with your left hand and trigger them with your right hand. Now, I'm going to go through a series of examples illustrating the different strumming keys, but this is what they basically are. The C is a downstroke chord, meaning all the notes are played from the lowest to highest, and that's what we heard in the last video in the auto strum mode. So for example, if I hit a C and then hit this note, we hear the downstroke. Now the D is an upstroke where all the notes are played from the highest to lowest. So a different way of playing an open chord. Now C sharp is a palm mute, which means partially muted strings. And then we have F sharp and G sharp, which are muffled downstrokes and upstrokes. And those are also known as scratching sounds. And you can incorporate those into patterns to trigger while you're holding down chords in your left hand. So you don't need to worry about playing the chords rhythmically, just those strumming keys. Now we also have the B flat note, which acts as a kind of silence note, and it mutes everything. So it's good for cutting off downstrokes and upstrokes. You can get kind of a partially muted chord. So you can get something like this. And it'll cut off the mutes as well, although they're very short already. You can get some nice rhythmic effects. Now the white notes, the E, F, G, A, B, C, are the individual strings from lowest to highest. And you'll notice that some were repeated there, so it depends on the complexity of the chord and how it's spaced out on the fretboard. But sometimes you'll get a repeated note if not all of those 6 notes are used. In this case, it wasn't. Here's another chord. In that case, all the strings were used. And finally, we have E flat, which acts as an alternate bass note. It plays the 5th of the chord instead of the root. That's when a 5th exists. So for example, here's a regular downstroke with a C. Now I'll hit the E flat note. So we can get the 5th bass note of the chord. So I've got some examples done up here, and this will really illustrate the power of these strumming keys. I'm going to start by playing this little chord progression, and I've used this same thing in all the examples, and it's just the left hand holding down chords. I'm going to turn auto strumming on for a moment so you can just hear what it sounds like. So it repeats over like that. So to start with, I've added in some strumming notes here, and these are simply downstrokes, upstrokes, and palm mutes. So we're only going to see C, C sharps, and Ds. Let me turn off auto strum. Try that again. So that's simply downstrokes, upstrokes, and palm strokes. Now let me go to the next example, and I've got the exact same whole note chords with that same pattern. And here I'm also using the muffled downstrokes and upstrokes. Now I'm playing a more rhythmic pattern here. So let's listen to this with downstrokes, upstrokes, and the muted strokes. So you see what I mean about this really coming to life. Now here, I'm going to use another example. And what I'm going to do is incorporate those, but I'm also incorporating some of the B flat notes, which will allow me to mute notes as well. So here I've got some of these B flats included as well. And you see them up there. So those B flats allow me to cut off the full downstrokes and upstrokes separately from the palm muting, so I can get more performance gestures like that. Now, here's another example where I'm using the alternate bass note. So again, same chords, and here I'm just using the E flats as well as some upstrokes and downstrokes. Did a nice little rhythmic thing at the end there to give it some movement, but the idea is that with those alternate bass notes, you really get a dominant pedal kind of feel. Now, in the next example, I'm going to use the arpeggiated notes. So I'm using, again, same pattern here, just holding those down, but it's going to sound completely differently playing the individual strings. So very different, but those aren't the notes that are being played. Those are just the strumming keys that are triggering the notes in these chords that are voiced for guitar. Now, in the next example, I've done the same thing. I've taken that exact same arpeggiated pattern and I've just made it double time. And I've added in some mute notes to get a really percussive rhythmic effect. So I've got a couple of tracks here all pointing to this same instrument. So just to recap what's happening here, I've got these notes held down in my left hand. My right hand is playing these arpeggiated notes, which is the same that we just saw here, but I've doubled up the time. And I've also added in some B flats to mute them randomly. And it doesn't matter if they overlap or if they cover up some of these notes, the B flat takes priority. So those are some ideas of how you can use the strumming keys. So let's review what we've learned here. There are 12 strumming keys that begin an octave above middle C and also 3 octaves below. One other thing I forgot to mention, when no notes are held down, they'll trigger a muted strum. So you don't even need to be holding down a chord. It'll remember your last chord and just trigger a muted strum. So the C is a downstroke. Chord notes are played from the lowest to highest. The D is the upstroke chord. They're played from highest to lowest. C sharp is a palm mute, which partially mutes the strings. F sharp and G sharp are muffled downstrokes and upstrokes, and they're also known as scratching. B flat is a silent note which mutes everything. E, F, G, A, B, C are the individual strings that play the notes in the chord, and we play them from lowest to highest. You can also play them in reverse to go from highest to lowest. And the E flat is an alternate bass note, the fifth, wherever possible. See you for more in the next video.